Okay. All right, we are live. I would like to introduce you to Francesco Da Vinci. This is a little different than what I've been doing recently. A lot of political work, interviewing candidates, and I'm very glad that Francesco reached out to me and wanted to talk about his book. And also, you are working on a new documentary, correct?
Based on the book.
Based on the book. Okay. And let me pull up, we'll share this here, and bear with me a little bit. I have to I'm running the tech as well at the same time. So here we go. So, Francesco, were a peace activist during the Vietnam War and a very outspoken, conscientious objector. Should we start with that?
Sure. Uh, it was a rough road. I came from a life of privilege, and the last thing I thought I'd be doing is refusing induction and facing a 5-year prison term, which is what happened. So, but I felt every day the broadcasts were coming into our living rooms about the death of men, women, and children in Asia, and then our young soldiers who had a sense of duty. And so I kept a journal. And not only did I keep the journal, I took pictures everywhere I went from 1961 to 1971. So it's truly a historical book. And the sub theme is a drama romance and the strain it put on the relationship with my fiance.
Wow. Okay. So you were born in what year?
45, the last day, New Year's Eve in DC.
Okay. And so you grew up in the DC suburbs? You said,
Yes.
okay.
And, here's something that's very interesting, Kelly. If when you're facing the draft, right, a big factor about the likelihood of you being approved as saying your ethics oppose the war is the geographic location of your draft board. And that really shouldn't be. So,
Mm,
like if I'm in the South in Virginia, which is where I was, I had an extra hard time because they were so pro war compared to a
mm,
draft board in the San Francisco area. It's a totally different makeup. So
wow.
that's a big factor in the likelihood of you being approved by your draft board to recognize your ethical stand.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember just a couple of years ago, I know Dennis Kucinich was very vocal out against it. There was talk about that they would be instituting a new draft. And
Yes, you're trying to bring it back.
hmm, hmm,
And now they want to include women in the draft.
hmm. So, some people will say, oh, well, maybe people would pay more attention to what's going on if you were, involuntarily being sent to go to war. Um, but yeah, it's hard to imagine that being implemented again. But it's interesting. We have a lot of candidates that are veterans, and they tell me, well, there's some like Greg Stoker. He told me we call it the poverty draft. So what we really do have right now in this country is an economic or poverty draft. I think people that don't have better options. I even had one candidate. He's an independent. Refer to he said, well, the military is socialism. You go in and you get your
This
health
is a
care.
good point, and I agree entirely. There are many people who think this is the road out of poverty and everything will be taken care of. And of course, they minimize the risk to their lives. And the idea, they put it in the back of their mind that they're going to be trained to kill other people.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas their ethics, many times, they just don't know that there is an alternative. So, one of the things my peace group did, which was nonviolent action in San Diego, the most military city in America, just about, we leafleted the draft calls and we said, here are people, draft lawyers that will counsel you for free. In other words, if you're entitled to certain, you want to be a conscientious objector, or if you have a physical disability, they will give you counseling for free. And you got to give credit to these draft attorneys. They didn't charge a dime. And
Wow.
I had one myself, and it made a huge difference. So you're right. Minorities are put to the front lines, and they do it for the economic reasons. And it
Mm-hmm.
is socialism for sure.
Wow. Okay, so what happened exactly? You were how old when your number got pulled?
Well, you're supposed to register when you turn 18, and being not thrilled about going into the military, I was late, and they threatened you with 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, which is the equivalent of $75,000 today just for not registering. However, many people did that anyhow, and it wasn't followed through with prosecution, but you can see the intimidation tactics. So finally, I registered late, and then it was the war started in 64. And by 1968, I could no longer look myself in the mirror and not take the stand. I knew I was a conscientious objector. And every day, remember, you're seeing body counts on television every day. And, it's just like my best buddy served in Vietnam. And so that was an influence too, because I saw he was following his sense of duty, but I wasn't following mine. And that helped, me to take the stand.
I mean, that really, from what I know, and we had Laurel Krauss, whose sister Allison Krauss was killed at Kent State, join one of our candidates for Assange panels in 2024 because we were talking about all the student protests now out, against Gaza. So I've learned a lot about that time period from all of her great interviews she did with Emily Kunstler. They interviewed, I believe it was in 2015, they interviewed everyone they could find that had been at Kent State or had any sort of connection to it at all. But one of the things I learned was that you could go to the National Guard. I guess it was. Or was that an
It
option?
was.
Okay, so a lot of people would choose that instead of going into the war, right?
And,
Okay.
when you mentioned Kent State, I think this generation really isn't aware of how risky it was in the 60s to go to those marches because it was not an unusual thing where the authorities opened up fire on nonviolent protesters. People just know about Kent State, but there were, like Jackson State was underreported. That was a predominantly black school, and I think that seems to be why it was underreported. That they
Mm-hmm.
actually shot into the dormitory there. So
Right.
there were many cases when people say like, "Oh, it's the same." It wasn't the same. It was more violent in the 60s and more pervasive. So you were taking a big risk, and for some reason, uh, I lacked common sense. I always had to go to the front of the marches to show my moral indignation to what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And my girlfriend said, "If you're going, I'm going," because sometimes I would ask her not to take the chance. I didn't want to see her take the chance I was taking. She
Mm-hmm.
just said, "If I'm going, you're going." And she came right to the front with me.
Well, I have to say, kudos to Laurel Krauss because she always brings up Kent State, excuse me, Jackson State as well, which I think was like 5 days later or something like that, because it is underreported. So she does always bring that up.
Well, another example is People's Park. That was in Berkeley, and that was over a park. And the university wanted to change it into a parking lot, hence the Joni Mitchell song about parking lot. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I was in that with my girlfriend, and they sent 128 to the hospital. And the tear
Mm.
gas was so strong that several miles away, they had to evacuate the children from elementary schools.
Wow. I have to admit, I don't know that much about that particular story. Do you want to tell more?
Yeah,
I was
well,
born
I
in
mean,
71, so all of
I'm
this
gonna,
happened right before I was
yes,
born.
and by the way, it's my photos of these marches are in the book too.
Hmm.
So we're at that march, and what would happen sometimes is somebody random would throw a rock, and a lot of times uh, the authorities that would take a really minority happening, and then they'd make that uh, appear as a general thing. And I
Hmm.
remember many times people in authority would talk about the rock throwers as if everybody protesting non-violently is a rock thrower. I got it in a graduate school class. So I'm at the People's Park demonstration, and somebody from a balcony threw a rock. and the police or soldiers would turn instinctively and just fire up randomly, and they ended up shooting observers. And that's what happened at People's Park. They blinded a guy for the rest of his life, and they killed another one. And like I said, 128 went to the hospital.
Jeez.
So that was the risk you took.
Hmm. Um, so I was actually raised by my grandparents, really, who were born in the 20s. So I heard lots of stories. Not that far removed from it, but I do understand as well, like from my aunts and uncles, that the generation gap then too, like versus what you have now, there were a lot of parents that were not siding with their kids that were out there doing this, which is very different from now, I think. So how do you think that played into
The
how we,
generation gap, I have to say, extremely different. People are always asking me, what's the real difference between this generation and the 60s? And one of the things was it was economically a good time.
mm,
So we were in a better position to protest just economically. We weren't going through COVID or anything like that. And another big difference is we were very focused on ending the Vietnam War, and we took our nonviolent techniques on the shoulders of the civil rights movement that came from the 50s into the 60s. So we were very unified and relatively organized, and we stayed with the Vietnam War. And it's the first time that I know of that a generation has ended a war by just staying with it in the streets. And so
mhm,
that those are the differences, though. We were very, now the generation is kind of split down. How divided we are. So
mhm.
that's a big difference between now and the 60s of the movement for the civil rights and the peace movement carrying through.
Right, but like if you were at a protest, like what I heard about Kent State, that was shocking. But there were people that were saying, "Oh, they should have shot more," or it
This
was
is
much easier for the older generation, the parents of the protesters, to, I guess, believe. When the media said everyone was throwing rocks or whatever, they were more apt to be like, "Oh, the long-haired hippies,"
Well, let me
were.
put that in context because this is what happened that got Nixon elected. Okay. So from 1964, the war begins. Small protests started 65 on. 1967, October 21st, was the first big national march, the March on the Pentagon that Norman Mailer wrote about called Armies of the Night, and he won the Pulitzer for it. I was in that march in the third row with my girlfriend, and we
Oh wow.
marched from Lincoln Memorial, and the pictures are in the book again, Lincoln Memorial to the Pentagon. And you had a choice of going up the Pentagon stairs to talk to the soldier. Again, that was the spirit of it that was distorted by the press.
Hmm.
And the spirit was reconciliation. Keep in mind, my best buddy is serving in Vietnam, and we never let our political differences get in the way of our friendship. So a lot of people don't realize a lot of the soldiers that were disillusioned joined the peace movement. And of
Hmm.
course, the government didn't like that. I mean, so they tried to circulate and overemphasize stories of like a protester spitting on a soldier. There was a lot of propaganda. I mean, of course, there
Right.
were some nut cases,
Sure.
where the
Well, and also instigators, right? I mean, we know that that is
good
definitely
point in
something that still happens.
Chicago, in at the demonstration for the Democratic National Convention, they said it was mind-boggling how many undercover agents were in the crowd. We used
Mm-hmm.
to joke and saying maybe that's the majority here.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that really surprises me now, having learned all of what I have about things that happened right before I was born, and now again, it's the same tactics that they use, the propaganda and the same, sending instigators. So you'd think we would all wise up and and see that, right? But
Well,
the
keep
other
in mind,
similarity,
J.
oh,
Edgar Hoover was in charge of the FBI, and he
right.
targeted the civil rights movement and the peace movement of all things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know how he went in after Dr. King. So the
Yes.
priorities were amiss for sure. But let me get back to one point real quick. And that is when you mentioned about the generation gap, it was very
Mm-hmm.
extreme. That's the
Right.
phrase, don't trust anyone over 30, that kind of thing.
Ah.
So
Uh-huh.
my girlfriend said, she said, Francesco, after the big march, right? She she said, I said, don't you think we've got to stay in the street? And she said, no, let's vote them out of office, the war makers. And I said, we can't wait for that. We've got to stay in the streets. That's the best hope to put pressure on the administrations, first Johnson, then Nixon, to end the war. And it turned out that was true. But at
Mm-hmm.
the time, I said, what do you think the older generation is going to say with us continuing in the street? And I said, they're going to see that maybe the war is wrong. And she said, no, I'll tell you what they're going to say. It's exactly what my parents would say, that the demonstrators getting beaten, that's what they deserved, and they should have beaten them all. And
Mm.
so that was a pervasive thing. My final point about this is that's how Nixon got in with such a sweeping majority against McGovern, because he campaigned on law and order. And the
Mm-hmm.
older generation was so tired of the protest that you didn't even have to take an issue stand if you went for law and order. And
Wow.
Nixon got the overwhelming, keep that in mind. Here's somebody who was criminal, and he gets the biggest margin of victory in the history of American politics.
And again, isn't it?
McGovern was a great human being and a strong moral character.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And again, isn't it crazy that we're seeing that same like repeat now, the law and order? You know, when we saw Speaker of the House Mike Johnson out at Columbia, you know, saying, "Oh, we're going to call in the National Guard." It's like, have you ever heard of Kent State before? But they have the same rhetoric. It's
Yes.
really crazy. Just yeah, rinse and repeat. But I wonder, the other similarity I think that from there then to now is you mentioned you for the first time really on TV. They were showing soldiers coming back in coffins and just the impact that that had on you. We see that now. My daughter's in her 20s, and she was very impacted by everything that she
Mhm.
saw in Gaza. That was on TikTok, which is of course why they wanted to ban it and censor all of that. But I wonder then, the older generation, something I never thought to ask my grandparents, but weren't they seeing the same imagery? Weren't they as bothered and upset by it? Or was it just kind of like, I don't know, what didn't weren't they also upset and understood why
Who are you talking about
protest?
now?
Like your parents, the older
Oh, the
generation, they must have
parents.
been seeing the same things on the news, and wouldn't I just wonder why so many there was such that gap there that they didn't feel the same, you know.
Yeah, well, it depended on your political background of your family. My parents were liberal and they were democratic, but
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want to see their son taking the risk.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
philosophically, they were all on board with my peace activism and conscientious objection. But in the
Okay.
book, I tell of how, as a 17-year-old, I had the choice of going to hear Dr. King in his I Have a Dream speech. And my parents were pretty negligent in general, but this is a time they said it's going to be a dangerous thing. About 200,000 people are expected to show up, and they
Mm-hmm.
forbid me from going. And I made that promise to myself. I felt so weak and unassertive that I watched the march on TV instead. But I told myself,
Mm.
I'm going to make a commitment. When I feel very strongly morally about something, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be intimidated and not do what I believe in my conscience I should do.
And so you really got out there and you took a lot of photographs. So maybe I should pull some of those up now. Do you
Oh,
want to
thank you.
sort of direct me in which would be
Thank
best
you.
to, let's see, which would be best to pull up here first? Oh, whoops, here we go.
By the way, for the book, if I can mention, if
Mm-hmm.
people are interested, it's a drama romance in the most significant decade in American history since the founding. This is on Amazon, just irefusetokill.com if you want to take a look at the book, and it has the photographs in it too.
Yes, and this is the website here.
Do you know
And
Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary?
I mean, I know of them.
I mean, know of him, right? I
Yes,
know. But
right.
he wrote the introduction, so I'm proud of that.
Oh, wow, right. Okay. And so you also, let me find this photo. Bear with me just a second. Running the tech here at the same time. You also knew, You also knew Joan Baez, right?
Yes, she was kind
Or you,
enough to when, as we were growing, the organization called Nonviolent Action that I formed in San Diego grew from 3 people to 300 people. And then
hmm
uh, her husband, David Harris, came down to join the group and help. And then Joan came down and performed benefit concerts to help support the group financially. This is
Okay.
my portrait of Rosa Parks, and I this is special to me because I feel like when we were talking, I think you can feel the determination in her eyes. And, she refused to go to the back of the bus on December 1st, 1955, in the South. And so that was a brave, strong stand, and she was arrested for it. But Martin Luther King came in and he supported the bus boycott. And then
hmm
the civil rights movement kept building.
Okay.
So
So
she's
I think
icon.
I can jump around, or I can flip through these in the order you sent me.
I
Which would be
supported Bobby Kennedy for president, and my girlfriend supported Eugene McCarthy. A little loyal opposition thing there. And
uh-huh.
this is at the 1964 convention, and
Wow.
it wasn't that long after President Kennedy had been assassinated. And when he went to
Wow.
speak at the Democratic convention, the applause lasted over 20 minutes.
Wow. That's just amazing.
This is that march on the Pentagon that I talked about. I'm in the third
hmm
row, and everybody's sitting on the bridge, and I stood to take this picture. About 100,000 people.
Wow.
This was the first big national march, so it was a little scary, Kelly, because we didn't know
hmm
what would happen, and we weren't experienced marchers.
hmm
And then up on the Pentagon, we tried to talk to the soldiers.
Okay.
That's the book. That's Muhammad Ali. And our cases went at the same time. I applied 1968, and then it was on appeal for 3.5 years. And finally, at the end, both of us faced 5 years in prison, and both of us won our cases on the very last appeal.
Wow.
And what a role model. I mean, he gave up 5 years of his career to do this. He
hmm
lost. He was at his peak, and he just had the courage to take the stand. And he was certainly an influence for me.
Yeah, I
Dr.
don't think I
King and
know that much.
what's
Do
that?
you want to talk a little bit about the pub? I don't know that much about like the public. I mean, what must he have dealt with um, for being a conscientious objector? You
Oh
want to
yeah,
talk?
what it means to be a conscientious objector, the process.
Well, just like, and particularly what Muhammad Ali dealt with, having done that like publicly, must have been
Well,
really
first of
shitty.
all, there's the stigma to deal with it, right? Because the
hmm
government is always taking advantage of that automatic reflex of the public. If the president goes to war, the public sort of jumps behind it no matter what, and then they really sort
hmm
it out later, kind of after the fact. And keep in
hmm
mind the parallel of all these presidents bypassing Congress to wage these wars. It wasn't
hmm
like we're
Right.
defending ourselves, right?
Right.
So Muhammad Ali stayed with it, and you know, his you, conscientious objection can be from an organized religion, or my case and other cases, mine was spiritual but non-religious.
hmm
And my case and other cases like it opened it up so that you could be a conscientious objector based on your personal ethics. Before, it was pretty much a done deal. If you had to be with an organized religion to have much of a chance to be recognized.
Wow. Yeah, with the number of people now that are not religious, that had to change, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And this,
So this is at the Pentagon March, the March on the Pentagon, and you can see the difference here. And I got to say, when I went down the line, I looked at the faces of these soldiers. I was looking for a kind face, and I said to one of the soldiers, I said, I'm not against you. That's not why I'm
hmm
here. I'm against your orders. So it was
hmm
always what the press didn't get, and still does not understand, there was a heavy sense of reconciliation. It wasn't just like us against them.
Right.
There was,
Well,
and that's why a lot of the soldiers came to my peace group. And I would say about 40% of our peace group were the disillusioned soldiers.
right. And we should mention that. And you said you started it and it went national,
Yes.
right?
It was covered by ABC and CBS national primetime news because what we did, and I got to give David Harris a suggestion. He came down and made this suggestion. We already had this called the Constellation Project for around an attack aircraft carrier that was going to go back and continue the bombing in Vietnam. And David came down and he said, I've got an idea to expand that great project. Why don't we have a citywide vote and ask the public, do you want this carrier to go back? Because the government was always saying, right, Nixon, he was saying, oh, the people, the silent majority wants this. And we said, okay, well, let's conduct a vote and ask them. And so it turned out that the vast majority were against the carrier going back. And what the TV broadcast showed too was that we took the vote from the carrier also, and the majority of the sailors were against it going back. That really shocked me too.
Wow. Well, I mean, speaking of sailors, look at what's happening right now. I had heard about it yesterday or the day before, but I don't know all the details yet. I guess were there like 7 overboard Navy? I don't know all the details, but yeah, obviously they're not all wanting to be there, or they've been under such duress with not getting enough supplies and all of that. So yeah, I think from what I have learned talking to veterans, that a lot of them, maybe they did go in with a one view on that they were doing this to defend democracy, and we all are sold the American exceptionalism story from the time we start kindergarten, and then they start to learn, like, wait, what exactly am I doing here? I'm fodder for the military industrial complex, right?
Yes, and keep in mind too that the press is very limited because
Mm-hmm.
there's a new documentary out and it's from a doctor's perspective in war, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the reality is, and I'm not going to go into detail, but the reality is men, women, and children are slaughtered. And when these doctors come in and they see they need to amputate a child's leg or whatever, this
Mm-hmm.
is the reality of war that we don't see in the press.
Right,
This
right.
is the real deal.
You're talking about a new documentary now?
Yes, but I don't know the name of it, but
Okay.
it deals with that. But the point is,
In Gaza?
we don't get the full picture of the realities of war, and it'd be
Mm-hmm.
much less likely that we'd be so enthused about these invasions, which is what they are, if we
Mm-hmm.
saw really the realities face to face.
Right. I was at an event, gosh, it's been a year or so ago now, to maybe North Carolina Peace Action, and Dr. I think it's Perlmutter, he was there in Gaza. I'm wondering if that might involve him, but I know he's one of several that have been there and treated children, and witnessed what had happened, and were just shocked and had to come back and speak out. So the more people that speak out is contagious. I think courage is contagious. So,
Yeah, and
and
then
this is your
a
girlfriend?
lot of your listeners now, there are a lot of people that are progressive feel alone. You're not
Mm,
alone, even though with the divisive state, probably the most divisive administration in the history of our country, and not to mention all the economic problems and the disparity. They say that about
mhm,
60% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, and we're the
mhm,
only major country that doesn't provide health care as a human right. We have the money for the education, we have the money for the health care, we do not have the will. So
mhm.
getting to this photograph, this is my fiance, Jane, and it was a terrible strain on a relationship. And many in the 60s who were activists, the relationship suffered because there was so much pressure and stress.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
but she was very spunky too. And, like I said, there were times when I was hoping she wouldn't come to me with the front of the line of a protest. And she said, "You're going, I'm going." And she went right up there. In fact, one time, a humorist, she left me in the dust and I had to go after her.
Uh-huh. Wow. Well,
We
that's
met at
good
the
you had a
University of
partner
Maryland.
that was, yeah, I don't know how it's kind of the same now, I think. I don't know how you would have relationships if you're a real involved activist, how if you could if someone wasn't kind of on the same page with you, right? Like
Yeah.
kind of a strain. Yeah. Okay.
This
If
is a
you want to,
Cuban.
let me know if you want to pause at any point or we can
I would
circle
say
back.
pause on this because it's a humorous thing and it little
Mm-hmm.
brings a levity to a serious subject. But the duck and cover
Mm-hmm.
exercise that everybody knows, the horns blare. And it was when we almost went to nuclear war with Russia, President Kennedy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so um, what happened was you'd have to get under your desk. And I always thought this is totally ridiculous. So I was the only student in my class. I wouldn't get under the desk, but I was always a photographer, even as a kid. So I brought my camera to school, and I photographed the other kids until the teacher said, "Francesco, get under your desk." And I said, "But this is ridiculous." And she said, "If the bomb doesn't kill you, I will. Now get
Oh
under
my
the desk."
Oh, that's great. I love to hear these things because yeah, you sort of you don't change from the time when you're young. Wow. See, I was born just after all of this, so I think it's part of why some of the fear mongering about Russia doesn't work on Gen Xers is because we didn't have this experience, you know.
Well, we need the understanding to replace the fear mongering, where you have an administration, which we do not have, that puts diplomacy is
Hmm.
first. We're
Right.
going right to war, right? We invade and bypass Congress, and then you know, it's
Yeah.
totally undemocratic. So we need to get back to our democracy and save it, in my opinion.
Here,
But I
here.
always am respectful to opposition. I have to say that. I think it's very important. And I would say that to progressives out there.
Hmm.
There's a tendency to dehumanize on the other side of things. And
Hmm.
it doesn't really help anything. So I think as much as possible, even though we are in a very extreme situation, I
Hmm.
understand that. But
Hmm.
let's keep our humanity number one.
Right, right. I think oh, I wish I had this clip up and ready. So from the show that I worked on, Assange Countdown to Freedom, John Pilger, you probably know who he is, passed away just a couple of years ago, but award-winning documentary filmmaker who's made so many films about the U.S. empire and its wars. But he referred to, I think he said the clip was he said that Trump is a caricature of the system, and Biden was I forget what it was, something just embodies the system. But it's easy to point at Trump, and this is things are absolutely terrible now, but these illegal wars have been going on for decades. So to
Yes.
say it's just Trump is, yeah, it's just more in your face, I guess, is what it is, right?
Yes, it's and let's not forget the economic disparity in our whole
Mm-hmm.
history, right? In our entire
Mm-hmm.
history, there's never been such wealth inequality.
Right.
So,
Yep.
people are having several jobs just to make ends meet,
Mm-hmm.
this is
Mm-hmm.
not right. And people
No.
are dying because they don't have adequate medical care. And
Right.
where's the money going? It's going into AI, it's going into the weapons for war. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Wrong priorities.
Right.
I'm going to
Were
give
you?
a humorous quote that has stayed with me. When Gandhi was asked, "Well, what do you think? Here you are here in Asia. What do you think of Western civilization?" And Gandhi said, "I think it would be a good idea."
Yeah. Yeah. Really. Good point.
This is a collage of the story. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
You probably can't see it very well on this screen here. I should
okay,
have blown this up, but yeah.
1961 to 71.
Wow. And these
It's
are all
very
your
involved in the
photos,
movie.
right?
Okay.
Or these are
Yes. Well, no, 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 not
all.
really. Not in this shot.
No, right. Okay. Some of them are. Okay.
Yeah, some of them. This is what I took at President Kennedy's funeral. Uh,
Wow.
and this is about 2 weeks after he died. And
Wow.
the mourners that showed up, I don't know if you have the next picture, if it's their
I
mourners
think
or not.
so. Yep.
That's the
Hold on.
inauguration. All
This is
right,
it.
there it is. That's it. as far now, imagine this. This is like 2 weeks later, 24 hours, the mourners. I mean, this would not happen today, right?
Mm.
This is as far as you could
Oh, no,
see.
definitely not today.
Right. So,
Wow.
this is, I was at the inauguration as a teenager, and I was so inspired. And President Kennedy spoke directly to my generation, and he said, get
Mm.
involved, do something
Mm-hmm.
to help your
Right.
country.
Yes. Right, right. Wow. Yeah, I do want actually, you know what? I think I'll stay on that photo a minute and I'll ask you. Um, when I first started interviewing kind of grassroots candidates back in 2018, late 2018, there was a candidate on that talked about, he was a teenager during these years. And I kind of asked, like what happened? And he, why did it just sort of fizzle out? And, he just said one assassination after another just really killed our spirit. And I wonder if you want to
Yeah,
speak
I'd
on
love to speak to
that.
that. I appreciate it. But I was in the college cafeteria, and the cafeteria was all in New York, and it was always jam packed, and there wasn't a single person in line when I went to lunch. I didn't know about the assassination, and I saw all the students huddled around the lunch tables. They were listening to radios, and
Mm,
I asked some guy, tapped him on the back, and when he turned around, I'll never forget, his face was pretty ashen white, and he said, "You don't know." And then he told me about the assassination. And I had to come down. I came down by train. And then that was 1963, November 22nd in Dallas. And then, you know, that was like uh, the president that really got my generation going to make America, live up to its ideals.
mm-hmm.
Uh, and then Martin Luther King in April was assassinated, and he was a role model and a hero for my generation. And then only a couple of months later, Bobby Kennedy is killed.
Mm-hmm.
So I was uh, for Bobby, and I read him 3 different times. One time by chance, shortly before he was killed, and then I went to his funeral instead of getting my college diploma because it fell on the same day.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, and
So very
also Malcolm
emotional time.
X,
And
I
those
don't.
after that, we were very burned out. And
Mm-hmm.
the last hope was Senator Eugene McCarthy running for president, but he didn't have the widespread support. And we
Mm-hmm.
kind of knew it was over by at that election where Nixon won the election.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to pause for just a second because I want to ask you about this. You were talking about the economics a bit ago, and that things were better back then, and I think that has a huge play in what's happening now. Because, and I kind of joke about it, though it's not funny, but I say that the empire kind of screwed up because things are so, and not to say that you all went back to sleep, but after all of the assassinations, maybe killed some people's spirits and all of the violence, and people just couldn't take it anymore. But back then, you had, as a young person, you had the option to go on and live your life and buy a house and have a family, and that's not happening now. And so
True,
young people don't, I think it's like it got too greedy. And now, like, okay, they're still living with their parents and they're staying engaged. And they're not giving in. And so it's like maybe they would choose to just go on with their lives if they were able to. But it's just so hard these days that that's not an option.
yeah, it's a good point, and it has to be addressed. I mean, bottom line, we have to take our democracy back. This is a
Hmm.
government of we the people, and we've lost that for now, and we
Hmm.
have to reclaim it. And
Right.
never, I would say to your listeners, don't give up hope, because it
Mhm.
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and you get immobilized. And if you think it's hopeless, it is. And if
Mhm.
you think it becomes, momentum if you stay in there and keep the hope alive.
Right. You mentioned, I think you said it was your girlfriend that talked about voting. Did she say we aren't going to vote our way? I forget what you said.
Oh, yes. She said, let's vote the war makers out. And I
Right.
said, it's not enough.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think it's great. That's a great thing to do, but it's not
Hmm.
enough. I'd say do more that you can, and it doesn't have to be a big movement. Even these simple acts of kindness, are important. They add up.
Right, right.
Atomic
Absolutely.
habits.
Yeah, I do think we should have more. I spoke to someone yesterday about this. It's called a good party. They have like tools for independent candidates, but I said we really need some focus. I think on like good news. We have a lot of bad news. There's no doubt about that. But I think if we had more focus on what some of these activists are accomplishing, that would do a lot to boost the morale and combat apathy that sets in when you feel like you can't change anything, right?
Yes, and that's the pitfall, and that's exactly what uh, people that are putting profit above people would like to happen. If we give
Hmm.
up, we're not active. I
Hmm.
have to give a lot of credit to Bernie Sanders, who's out there and pushing all the way around. I just admire that. He's a voice in the wilderness, but he keeps going like Energizer Bunny, and we're getting more and more progressive candidates, and younger people want to get into office. So, when you brought up the news thing, I think that's important because, tell yourself, examine the news. And like Kelly said, it's negatively oriented and
Hmm.
conflict sells. Okay. You're not getting a balanced picture. There is good news out there. Um, so I think it's just to have that consciousness. Don't let yourself be manipulated by the news. And I'm a photojournalist, so I'm telling you, be skeptical. We all have our biases, and when you're looking at the news, there's no such thing as the objective thing, and it's
Hmm.
certainly not balanced today.
Yeah, I think it would help to keep people from checking out. Like you said, the conflict sells and arguments sell. But I think people then get tired of that and they check out. And if you had good coverage, that maybe that would draw an audience.
And we need to put more energy into listening to each other. It's a
Yes.
lot of like my way or the highway kind of mentality,
Hmm.
and kind of like you start to talk to somebody, and then you say, "Oh, okay, we can't talk about that," blah blah. And be open. Sometimes I'll be in an Uber ride or something like that, and the driver is just like boom, or the other way around, ask questions, and it's a dialogue. That's
Hmm.
what's missing. We that
Right,
respectful dialogue. You don't have to agree with each other, but
right.
have that respectful dialogue.
Yes, I've been experiencing a little bit of that recently because I interviewed we have panels with third party and independent candidates, and they agree on a whole list of items, which is fantastic. But then we get into the economics. We talk to a green and a libertarian, and that's where the conflict is. But we've had a couple of good discussions. Like it's a tightrope to walk, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's been good. But I do want to say I wonder what you think about this on the voting. It's really a big debate, I notice, in the activist community. There, people all the time are just fed up with the election. We can't fix this with electoral politics, and they say, we can't vote our way out of this. And I understand that sentiment. It's why I work on election integrity and election security efforts. I host meetings every week about
Thank you
that.
for that.
Yeah, it I was just compelled because I thought it was really important because we get kind of sold a story and we don't know what's real and what's true in the machines and it's all
Especially
confusing.
today. Yeah.
Hmm. But it bothers me when I hear people say we can't vote our way out of this because I think that is what the establishment would like us to believe, that we don't have power as voters, and we do because like 85 to somewhere between 85 and 90 million people did not vote in 2024. And they don't vote because they don't see candidates or they don't think it will matter. They don't think it will change. So I think I really say we need one foot on the street. I'm all for the protest, but we also need one foot in the voting booth. So I wish people would come together more on that because I think we absolutely have to have both. If we just do the protest, the violence that you witnessed, that you experienced in the 60s, I mean, we have some really, they've got tools now, the flock cameras and drones, and it could get really, really bad, really.
That has turned out to be a very good thing that we never had in the 60s, the body cams and stuff. Let me tell you, could have used that quite a bit in the 60s.
Right, right. I know. Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of stuff now gets exposed. And back then, I guess they could just make up whatever and no one knew what the truth of what happened.
You know of Alice Walker,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the writer? So she made a great point about how, when we convince ourselves that we don't have power, that's a huge problem right there.
Yes, yes.
And
And
so
they,
she's calling attention to that. And I think that's a great service for the public.
yeah,
Don't convince yourself you don't have the power because, again, it's a self fulfilling prophecy.
exactly. And I just have to say one other thing about the voting. If they weren't worried about it, they would not fight so hard. Almost every candidate I speak to has trouble getting even on the ballot. So they are actively preventing other choices from even being an option for you. So that tells you a lot right there.
So
Well,
I
I
say use the power, vote, but do other things too.
exactly, yes, do both. So I want to ask you a little bit about, so right before this interview, you were out still doing photo shoots. So do you want
Yes,
to talk about, and maybe I can pull
sure.
up some of the photos. Let's see.
Well, I was with Getty Images for 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
all the magazines, Time, Newsweek, that kind of stuff. And I guess the main focus of my photography has been celebrity portraits. And in the 60s, it was the iconic activists that I photographed, Congressman
Right.
John Lewis, et cetera. And
Mm-hmm.
then uh, I did a lot of fashion photography in New
Mm-hmm.
York, and then street photography. And I actually did a lot of ballet photography too. I like the motion, and I did two of the Olympics. So those are my topics for photography. And today I did a big shoot.
Wow. Okay. Let me just pull this up. I'm trying to pull up your
You
website.
know, for your listeners out there, sometimes if you're I had a very rough, dysfunctional family background, and photography became my freedom. So I would say if you're in a bad situation, a rough situation, sometimes a creative outlet can be like so therapeutic.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
there's some of the photography. Thank you. I don't know where you come up with this, but
Oh,
there it
this
is.
is just from the main, I think, main page of
A
your
couple
website.
of sites. So, but anyhow, my message is, it's a positive thing
Oh,
to
here we
reach in.
go.
Oh, yeah. So this is Sarah Jessica Parker. I can't believe how people are still watching this show. It's great. And then Spike Lee, he was great. That was Time Magazine. Elvira, the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, Richard Dreyfuss. I just saw Close
David Bowie.
Encounters for about the 100th time again.
Uh-huh.
David Bowie, Stevie Nicks here, and Halle Berry.
Wow. And
That's
then
Chuck
this
Berry.
one,
A
I
lot
love
of people
this
call him
one.
the father of rock and roll.
So
And
what
he would
year would
bring,
this
go ahead.
be? What year was this one? The New Year's Eve?
I don't know, but it was in New York and a New Year's Eve, my birthday. And he would,
Mm.
at the end of his shows, he would always bring up the audience and they'd
Oh,
jam with.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, and then these are not famous
That's
people,
our
but headshots.
commercial. Yeah. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
See the fashion beauty. I mean,
Wow, cool. So are you self-taught? I mean, you just picked up a
all
camera
self
since you were
taught.
a kid? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was I was on a mission, and like I think I went deeper into it partly because I had such a rough family background, and so
Mm-hmm.
this really my escape. It was therapeutic, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still today. I love it. Tony Bennett when I photographed him for his portraits, he said
Mm-hmm.
to me, Francesco, I've never worked a day in my life because I love what I'm doing so much.
Mm, that is so true. Yeah, you have to find something you love doing. Wow. Okay, Halle Berry. Where's that? Must be in the 90s, right? Yeah.
I guess it's hard to remember, but Hallie was starting with Fashion Beauty, and
Mm-hmm.
then with a few magazine things, and then she made that transition to the acting.
Mm, right.
And,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and that's Cindy Crawford, who was a pleasure
Wow.
to work with, Andrew.
Cool.
And a lot there's some of the dance stuff. I think these are two very well-known posters too. This is Brooklyn Bridge, and
Uh-huh.
that's ABT dancer.
Wow. Well, you've
Thanks
led
for
a very
sharing.
interesting, yeah, you've led a very interesting life.
Well, thank you.
So you ended up
No
in,
common sense, though.
do what?
No common sense,
Oh,
though.
well, you know. Um, oh wow, Sophia Loren. Okay. And so you moved out and or have you're in California, you've been there most of your life
10
now?
years now,
Oh, okay. 10
and
years.
I love it. I'm in West LA near UCLA,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm thinking of trying to teach extension for how to write a memoir, like my book, and maybe portrait and street photography.
Wow. So you're
Through
really
it.
slowing down, huh?
Oh, not, not really. And I do have at some time, I want to slip in a message about AI because that's where we're heading. And
Sure.
I'm an
Yeah.
AI scientist on the side. And whenever you feel it's appropriate.
Oh, sure. Go right ahead. I just want to make sure we cover all the
Oh, thank
historical
you. So
photos. Is
here's,
there anything I missed? I don't.
so I mentioned that uh, whenever it's appropriate, I'll hold up the book for people too. It's again, it's IRefusetoKill.com to
Mhm.
get the book. And you're welcome to say hello to me. And if anybody's in LA, I'm happy to sign the book for them too.
Well, yeah. Here, I'll pull this up again. Oops.
So on the side, I do AI science and call for guardrails, and I do space science, and it's about really the focus is colonization of Mars, and I photograph many of our astronauts, and feel very blessed and lucky that when I say blessed, of course it's spiritual, but not religious blessed, but I feel
Right.
very lucky and honored that Neil Armstrong was my one of my very best friends for 20 years. And so
Wow. And how did you meet? To photograph?
we were on the set of a TV show for NBC. I was a set photographer, and he was the
Oh.
guest, and we
Uh-huh.
hit it off, and we've been best buddies for 20 years.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure. You wanted to talk about AI. Go. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to mention it because I feel like it's definitely tied in for our topic of being progressive and taking care of we the people. And
Mhm.
we're heading into. I personally feel as a scientist and an artist that this is the most dangerous time, the most transformative time in not just American history, but in human history. So
Mhm.
I think this race that's going on, I have been calling for guardrails for a long time. I've been studying AI since the 60s. And
Oh,
right
wow.
now,
Okay.
we really don't know what we're doing. And we don't know how AI is operating internally. But we're on the race. And why? Again, we're putting profit above people. We don't, like I said, we don't understand. We don't understand the dangers. But there's a definite trend. AI is becoming more and more autonomous. And we know there are many instances where AI is deceitful. It doesn't
Yeah.
like to be shut down. It's recently, as I'm sure you know, it went out of the box and hacked another system on a security test. And with that increased autonomy, keep in mind that's AI making its own decisions.
Mhm.
Right now, we're hurting for human control of AI right now, and we're constantly giving more autonomy to AI. So,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. And when people ask me, they say, yes, there's an AI race. Who's going to win? China, or Russia or us? AI is going to win.
Mhm.
That's the bottom line. If you don't have the guardrails, you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know how to monitor it safely, this is an international problem. And it's
Mhm.
not just we get brainwashed and say, oh, we want to be first. That's what the oligarchs are saying because it maximizes their profit. But it's a definite danger to humanity.
Well,
So
there's been a lot of
Jeffrey
warning.
Hinton and others are calling for the safeguards, and I'm on board for that. And we ought to pause and put in, stop the big level chips and pause and re-examine for the international guardrails. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say I've heard some talk about an AI bubble that they really
Yeah,
think it's going to burst, and that's going to have really bad repercussions on the economy. As someone who does well, initially more writing, I'm very against AI and research. I'm very against AI being used in writing. And I will tell you, I mentioned Kent State earlier. When I was doing some work on that, looking into it, AI, I think it was just Google Chat, whatever, Chat GPT or something. It actually erased Laurel Krause's sister,
Oh my gosh.
replaced. I was looking for the name of a student photographer that had been there that day, May 4th, 1970, and it replaced. It said there were four victims, and it mentioned this student photographer and completely removed Allison Krauss as a victim. And I was just very bothered by that because as a journalist, what's going to happen in another 50 years? It's just going to be written right over and nobody's going to know what the truth is, and that to me is very scary. Now, as far as like, video production and stuff, the only AI that I do use to put my captions when on clips, but I make all of my clips manually, which is very time consuming, but I do that because well, my 22-year-old will give me hell for
How old?
data
How
center.
old?
She's 22, almost
Okay.
22 next
Yeah.
week or Sunday. But no, I mean, I know how concerned the Gen Z is about what the impact on the environment. But I also I try not to use it. I kind of joke about my little graphics for my shows. I piece it together. It probably looks like a kindergarten collage, but I refuse to use AI.
Yeah.
I just don't. I think it's bad for writing. I think it gets stuff wrong all the time. And I just, overall, I think it's just not good.
Well,
Maybe there are some
I
limited
can throw
uses.
in I can throw in some of the positive too,
Okay.
because I think the big payoff is going to be in the medical field, and they're going to. I
Mm,
think, yeah, I know.
okay.
I
Tell
think
me
this is a
something
big
good.
plus because this means that there are ways that we haven't thought about that people
Okay.
that would die are. It's going to save lives. I'm not saying we should be totally dependent on AI, of course. I'm just saying there is some plus right now, and medical is a
Mhm.
big one. Help blind people see, et cetera, et
Okay.
cetera.
Okay.
So there is the positive aspect, and I will not use AI creatively, but I will
Hmm.
consult AI. For example, I've neglected. I'm not as sharp in a business level as I am creatively, so I consult AI, and it has helped me, but I would never use it creatively myself. So
Right. I think
that's
it can be good for a search tool.
yeah,
Like,
that's what I mean.
okay, for
Research.
like legal, for instance, legal documents or legal information that is just really hard to search through a Google search. I think that can be useful, but I mean, it's also completely made up case law too.
Yeah.
So, and judges have caught that before. I've heard stories about that happening in the news. So I think I'm kind of shocked at the number of people that don't like use it as a tool to look, but you have to double check what it's telling you.
Definitely. Sure.
Yeah.
You take it with a grain of salt. Yeah.
Hmm. Right, right.
The
So in
book,
the
oh, go ahead.
no, in the medical, so you're specifically you're saying it can be a good tool. Is that I mean, the things I've heard is like it's actually there was a story that it completely made up an
Yeah. See,
eye
that's the
disease.
creative part again that I don't
Yeah.
touch.
Okay.
But
Okay.
like business, like asking a business question, what's
Mm-hmm.
the best way to approach blah, blah, blah.
Mm,
And then
okay.
I can just decide if it's relevant or if I agree or not. But at least it's more food for thought in an
Right.
area that I feel weak in.
Right, right. Well, you can't fight it. It's here. So if you can
Oh,
figure
it's
out
here.
ways,
Yeah. The genie's out of the bottle for sure.
right. So we can't just,
We can be uh, not become addicted to the tech too. It's a good reminder that and like
mhm,
you brought up the point for this generation, how do you decide what's real and what's not real? I mean, it's going to
right.
get more and more complicated.
Yes, yes. I know my daughter has a very good eye for, she can catch it right away. Now she does video editing and stuff as well, but she can pick it out immediately. But I think a lot of people, maybe the older people, we can't,
Oh, definitely.
they ran those ads, against like Thomas Massey was the story, and it was AI, and there were a lot of people that bought it, what they saw. So yeah, it's very dangerous. I don't know how we're gonna legislate all that stuff.
So with the way I tie it in with my book is that with the I think it's a danger because also AI is going to be weaponized big time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so already the major countries are talking about being first, not only for the profit and the armies and the new
Yes.
weapons through AI. And
Drones.
here's what I want the people to think about. What's happening is the military is granting more and more autonomy to AI to make its own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm talking like right now, I'm saying we really don't know how AI is operating internally, and we know it doesn't like to be shut down. And there's also the possibility of AI getting together with AI in a protective way and putting humans out of the loop.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to look down the road at this and not just go, 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 go for more profit.
Right, right. I think it's called the Lavender program, which is Peter Thiel's, like the drones that they were using in Gaza.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, what's going to stop that from being and that comes back to where I feel like yes, we need protests in the street, but that really concerns me if we're only doing that, the violence is just going to get worse, and they have the tools that, weren't available back in the 60s, so like that.
One thing I'd like to say for your listeners, and by the way, thank you for this service. I'm
Oh,
great,
no, please.
so
I'm so
grateful.
glad you reached out. This is great.
One thing I'd like to say to your listeners is that about the book, it took 11 years to write. I started with journals. And if you have
Mhm.
your own ambitions to maybe write a memoir or make it a cinematic memoir, uh, write down key phrases for yourself. This again is at irefusetokill.com. And I think the beauty of it is it's a drama romance, a compelling personal story that I think almost everybody can relate to. And it's in the context of one of the most significant decades in American history. And so it's a
Mhm.
drama romance. And I think it's got it all. And my ambition, of course, is to bring it to film, adapt it to film in the future. So I
Oh,
hope
wow.
another thing is it has a positive message. It's meant to inspire and to inspire you to uh, the pursuit of happiness along the way. Every day is important to be positive and to take care of your happiness. So I
Mhm.
think this is shows in the extreme circumstances a way out of that and be progressive and yet have fun along the way.
Yes. I'm going to go back to your photos for a second because I think we
Sure.
can skip over. Let's see. And I didn't know. Is it? You don't have to answer this. You're the fiance though. So the romance part of the story,
Yeah,
or
that's
you don't.
Shane. And yeah, she stuck with it. And if I can give her credit for something, when I was heading to prison for 5 years, because that's what it looked like, we kind of gave up about that I was going to win the case because it was on the final appeal. And she said, I'll move to the prison area to be close.
Wow.
But I
Wow.
won the case and didn't have to go to prison.
And I don't, if you mentioned this, I apologize, I didn't catch it. But what like percentage of people would win their cases?
I didn't catch it.
On when people opposed the draft,
Yes.
what were the percentages of people that would win their
I,
cases?
I know the all the exact figures. 170,000 were granted conscientious objection during the Vietnam War, but
Hmm.
the war was so unpopular that 600,000 illegally evaded.
Right, went to Canada.
30 to 50,000 went to Canada,
Hmm.
and the rest. And a lot of people have the. This is why I want to honor conscientious objectors throughout our history because we don't know their history. They're not in our history books, and they should be. So
Hmm.
conscientious objectors, they take a stand. They're not draft dodgers, as people think.
Right.
They are the ones who said, if I'm not recognized as a CO by my draft board, I will willingly go to prison. That's
Hmm.
not draft
Hmm.
dodging. That's what Muhammad Ali stood for.
Right. I wonder if you do you have any contact with, I believe it's Michael Preisner, Center
No.
on Consciousness. and War. I believe this is the right site. We've talked about it on our program when we had veterans on. I believe that's, no, this might be a different one. I believe that's what it's called though, but yes, Center on Conscience and War.
And for movie lovers, Hacksaw Ridge was the first major film about a conscientious objector that Mel Gibson made, and it got an Academy Award nomination.
Mm, wow.
Andrew Garfield starred in that.
Okay, I'll pull up that website in just a moment, but we'll go through what photo did we miss here? I think it was, oh, well, this is
That's President
Ray,
Kennedy's inauguration.
1961, right? Oh, okay.
And I
Wow.
got a chance. My buddy and I, he had a brilliant idea, and he said, "Let's yell to the president just in case he can hear us." And we went, "Hey, Jack!" And the president picked up his top hat and waved it to us.
Wow. Okay, and this is so cool.
Joan Baez at a press conference.
Wow. Cool. Okay, I think we got all of them there.
That's the
Okay.
60s for you right there.
Yeah,
Peace and love.
yeah. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna pull up this. Yeah, you really should. We should definitely see. I'm thinking maybe someone in Veterans for Peace certainly is in touch with. Let me do this. Sorry for the little delay here. Just pulling
They
up
endorsed the book.
Hmm?
They kindly endorsed the book, Vets for Peace.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah. Ray McGovern was just at an event, I believe, in where was he? Kansas, speaking about that. I'm doing some editing for his speech there. Okay, but here is, let's see, this is the site for this.
Well, that's a great organization. They've been around a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And what a service. What a service.
So, yeah, I don't remember. Maybe it just. I'm thinking it's journalist Michael Preisner has something to do with this now. But yeah, they have been around a long time. So yeah, I mean, there's so much opposition to what's going on right now. Even as you said about talking across to the other side. I mean, so many people that did vote for Trump, especially the younger people, they fell for the whole, his campaigning of no more wars, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's really, I mean, this is probably one of, well, I don't know what the numbers were of people that were uh, not in favor of the Vietnam War compared to the Iran. I don't even like to call it a war because we just attacked them,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's
It's
very
just,
unpopular. I know that.
yeah. Yeah. Well, on the books, it's one thing, and reality is another because the president's not
Hmm.
supposed to bypass Congress.
Yeah, that's such
So
a
we've got to
game,
work to get democracy back and stay
right?
positive is the first step for everything.
Hmm.
Stay positive, especially with these divisive times, and we're under the economic crunch and all
Hmm.
these things. So I think it's like staying positive, one day at a time. So,
Hmm.
that helps, so you don't look at just get overwhelmed, and
Hmm.
even if you center your life, be grateful, right? And then if you can do acts of kindness in your day to day, there you are. You're on the right path, and you'll feel better, and you take care of yourself with self esteem. I'm social psychology is my background, and
Oh,
I think
okay.
it all begins in here. Don't look for it out there. Start here.
Hmm.
Then you're in a better position to help other people. But you got to
Right.
take care of this first.
Right. Very true. Very true. I think when you're an activist, you need to take time to sort of, take a little break because it can be kind of exhausting sometimes. But there are
Yeah.
so many of us out there fighting in one way or another. So your story is just really inspiring, and it's just really cool to hear all more about what happened in the '60s. And what I guess I would say, what is that your main message? You would say stay positive and get out and protest, and anything
Well,
else
I
you
would say it starts with the individual. I
want?
think you've got to start with your own peace. That's where it all begins because you can't just look out for somebody to fix things. It's kind of like with dating, when you think that somebody's just going to fix your life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So on that level, you got to be positive and feel good about yourself. That was a big issue I went through because I had such a negative family. So I worked on that. I read every self-help book I could get a hold of, and that
Mm-hmm.
helped a lot. And then I had more good feeling and self-love to share with somebody else. But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't take care of this, then you have negative energy to bring to other
Right.
people.
That's very true.
So
That's
I
very
think that's the first big step. And don't get overwhelmed by everything. Take everything bit by bit. That's why that
true.
book, Atomic Habits, that was the point. These little things add up.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking this time. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Francesco.
Thank you. And I welcome anybody if they want to give comments. There's a lot of different sites I'm on, all the main sites. And if
Mm-hmm.
you look at the book, I refusetokill.com, and you want to, I think my email is on there too. You want to make a comment, feel free.
Okay, great.